All right, what's up, guys? Back here, Southeastern 14, with Max Barr. Our 8 a.m. Saturday morning live show. And the way Friday started, we were not sure. We were like, are we going to have anything to talk about in here other than just 4 SEC losses? But luckily, that was not the case. We had a couple teams come through, Alabama, Texas A&M, pick up some big victories. One team did not, and here we are, Max. And then there were 3, the Vols, the Crimson Tide, and the Aggies, just like we all predicted to start this thing, right?
Why us, Blake? Why do the career highs, the 10 of 20 from 3? Why us? Why does that have to happen to us? It could have happened to anyone. It just so happens to just bury us. Well, guess what? We're not dead yet because A&M put on a heck of a performance, and Alabama, I think they broke the SEC record for 100-point performances in a season. So, hey, we got 3 teams left. Big East has 3 teams left. Call it a wash. We're still here.
Yeah, I put out the tweet yesterday. Of course, after Auburn lost, I'm looking at Twitter, and like the trending thing I see is the SEC, and I'm like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna click on that. No thanks. I don't want any part of it. So it is kind of interesting. I texted someone yesterday, and this was after the Auburn game, because at that point I'm sitting there like, okay, Alabama's about to lose, A&M's about to lose. Like, you're in total just negativity mode at that point. You're thinking the SEC is officially cursed here. Like, that's kind of what it comes down to. But I texted someone. I said, well, it's all good. I said the SEC is just going to have to depend on Rick Barnes now to carry them all the way. And like, I'm half joking. I know Sam's making comments here, but we talked about like what the most ironic setup could be here is if ultimately it's Tennessee and Rick Barnes are the ones that are, the ones carrying the SEC through this entire tournament. But this is where we are though, and I mean, I see people, having their fun in the comments. I guarantee you we're not going to have 800 plus people here this morning. So this will be a very intimate group because I think some people have checked out for the season. There were Auburn fans tweeting at me saying, I appreciate your show, but I will basically be hiding in the dark for the next week. So you've earned that opportunity. You've earned that right. Go do what you think is best. But there you go. So, all right. Well, let's just jump into it. Let's just go ahead and get the Auburn game out of the way because I know there are not a lot of Auburn fans that are probably going to be checking in this morning. So, I look, Max, it's the deal we always talk about. It's funny because, like, I wish if we could just put our chat thread, or our text chat, it's like we always get these hints as games are going along, and we're just kind of like, all right, okay, this is not playing out the way it should. They better do this. They better do that. And, I mean, 3 minutes into the game, you could not have drawn up a worse sort of scenario where Jalen Williams goes down, and then 30 seconds later, however long, Chad Baker-Mazara gets ejected. And at that point, I'm thinking, this league is cursed. Like, it's just, this NCAA tournament is cursed for the SEC. Because, at that point, I really was. I'm like, okay. So I don't know if Jalen Williams is coming back. He did come back, so it was okay. But you're down one guy, and we talk about the depth. Like, that's all we talked about is how deep Auburn is. But still, you're down a key rotation guy 3 minutes into the game. And from there, I texted you guys. I don't remember. You texted me something. It was something about Trey Donaldson and the all-bully ball team. And I think my response was, I said, Max, I'm like, Auburn better put them away right after halftime. I said, if they don't, I said, they're going to get beat. This is how it works in the tournament. It's the same thing like with Kentucky and Oakland. If you don't put these teams away, you put yourself in a position where you have a chance to lose. And you have much more to lose than these teams do. And you could just see it. Auburn missing free throws. A couple other things. Like, it just, I mean, credit Yale. They're the ones that made the plays. Auburn just could not make the plays that we were used to seeing them make. So,
I think Broome missed the front end. Denver Jones missed the front end. Trey Donaldson missed both. Where's the tweet? I got it from Evan Maya. Auburn missed 4 shots and 3 free throws in the last 30 seconds. In the last 30 seconds. Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, with 7 minutes left, when it was 68-58, when Auburn was up, Yale had a 2% chance of winning. Are you kidding me? So, I mean, just call it you want to talk about a perfect storm of ejection, injuries, ejection.
Whatever.
These teams got me losing my mind here.
Inject me with something the rest of the way.
Inject
In this
me
NCAA
with anything
tournament.
other than a Pulikitis 3. How about that? I mean, it was nightmare fuel. It was nightmare fuel. It sucks that this is the way that the season ends when it's not a full team. You miss all those free throws late. Oh, I'm still hurt. Still hurting, Blake. Still hurting.
Well, listen. So the only good thing here, I guess, is you don't have to check the bracket at all anymore. Like that's the good thing. We just. I mean, yours was gone from game one, but listen, the full thing we can now just completely throw out. And shout out to Tony, Zach. They're both here. They're Auburn fans, but they're here supporting us. Again, we appreciate Tony supporting the Substack as well. We do appreciate that, Tony. But I mean, this was one again where you just kind of looked at it, and Broome. It felt like Broome was going to be able to do anything he could in this game. Like from the start, that was kind of the sense you got is that, man, he could do whatever he had to do to win this game. And ultimately, you look at just some of the things that played out, and like I said, I mean, Yale hit some big shots. Pulikitis he knocked down big shots, and like you mentioned at the start, it's like Jack Golke, Pulikitis here, Jack and John just completely destroyed 2 SEC Final Four hopefuls. And I know people are talking about the officiating and that kind of stuff, but I'll be honest, like that's kind of a situation where you can't put yourself in that position to even have that be a factor. And, again, that's why it's a 4-13 type game. And but I mean, we said it's like what do these kind of teams do? And Yale did have 11 turnovers, but Auburn had 14 turnovers. And if you remember back, Max, when we were talking about Auburn, which they didn't have many bad stretches throughout the year, but there were some of those where we're like, man, they turned it over too much in that road game, or they turned it over here. And we said, like, some of this may just come down to the guard play. And I don't know if the guards were just awful. Obviously, Aiden Holloway did not have his best game. He didn't score. But I just think, like it comes down to it. There's a lot of – I mean, you could probably ask any team that's ever been in that spot as the higher seed, and you want to talk about the pressure that sets in as this game goes along, the pressure – you're starting to feel kind of the energy change in the building because people are starting to root for the underdog if they're not there to root for Auburn. And, like, it's just, man, it's like one of those things where it just didn't play out the way you wanted it to. So,
yeah, just kind of looking through the roster, I think so. Jalen Williams is done for sure. That was his grad year, right? 2020, 21, 22, 23, and 24. So Williams is gone, but Denver Jones can come back. Chaney Johnson, Trey Donaldson, Cardwell can use a grad year if he wants. And then Baker Mazar is a junior. Broome's a junior, but I would imagine that he's an NBA. Yeah, I thought he was going to be last year. I would imagine he goes this year. But, I mean, I think there's only 1 or 2 guys that are out of eligibility.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see kind of what the roster looks like next year because, as always, I mean, they're obviously going to get some good players added to the mix and transfers. And by the way, I know people are saying, let's talk about the winners. We will talk about the winners, but I just want to be clear here. This is the biggest story. All congratulations to Alabama and Texas A&M, but, like, this is the story that people are certainly talking about the most because it's March and upsets, and this is where we usually start. Unfortunately, we've had to start here multiple times now in the first round.
It's fun now.
So, we'll get to the good stuff in just a second. So we like to get all the bad stuff out of the way first, which there's been quite a bit of bad so far in this NCAA tournament for the SEC. I mean, again, they started 1-5, and then of course you had A&M and Alabama pick up victories. So yeah, I mean, certainly a disappointing finish for Auburn, no question. We thought the path was there, but hey, the path doesn't matter if you don't win your first game. And so, it's I'm sure everyone wanted to see the Auburn-UConn game, but fortunately, Yale marching on here in March. And again, we'll kind of do season wrap-ups for every team after the NCAA tournament, and Max and I will be doing transfer stuff every day probably, and it's going to get nuts. So if you're an Auburn fan,
I've already got a list started, Blake.
He's got a list.
I've already got
Max
a list.
has got the list ready to go. So if you're an Auburn fan, you're checking out for the rest of the season, come on back in soon. We'll be talking more about Auburn and the rest of the SEC as we move forward. So you're definitely going to want to check out now, Auburn fans, because you know who we're about to talk about. And that's going to be the Alabama Crimson Tide, who are marching on here in the NCAA tournament. They just hammered Charleston. If you didn't watch the game and you just looked at the score and are like, well, there's Alabama again, giving up 96 points. They only won by 13. This game was not even close. Like, walk-ons were in with, I don't even know, 5 minutes or more left, something. So Alabama was up, I think, 30 at one point. So, yeah, and so this was not even kind of a contest. They're up 31 with 8 minutes to go, basically. So Mark Sears was tremendous. We've mentioned just, the guy just consistent as can be. He has been fantastic all year long for Alabama, and this looked like the old Alabama where we said what happens if Alabama gets at full strength. Nate Oates brought that comment up, before the game. He's like, hey, we're finally going to have everybody. And, I brought up the stat, Max, when we were joking about the trends that I put out and how they were all in Charleston's advantage basically since the past month. But, one of the things I mentioned was Alabama was 309th in three-point percentage over the past month. I'm like, the law of averages tells you that's not going to continue, and they go 13 of 23 in this game, 57%. They got the shots they wanted. They got the free throw line 37 times. Now, they only made 24 of them, but luckily it didn't matter here. But, yeah, this was about as impressive of a performance I think you could have asked for if you're an Alabama fan. They were efficient everywhere. They even shot 62% from two. And we said that could be the weakness for Charleston. If they're not hitting shots and trying to keep up with Alabama at the same rate, they're just not the best defensive team. And so it felt like Alabama could get whatever they wanted. And ultimately they did. And once again, Aaron Estrada, I know, Max, he didn't hit 15. I know he didn't go over 14 and a half.
It's okay. It's okay.
But the guy still filled the stat sheet again against Charleston. 13 points, 8 assists, 7 rebounds in this one.
Listen, the SEC won. I'm taking it. I'm taking this and running with it. I think an angle of this that bodes really well for the SEC here is just cruised in the first round game. And I know Sears and Estrada with 32 and 30 minutes, but just cruised. Only 10 turnovers, and 3 of those were Mo D. No starting guard turned it over more than once. Just a clean, smooth, perfect first round game. And you got a great look at GCU now too. I know I picked GCU in my bracket. Don't care. That thing's been in the trash for days. We're off the GCU. Okay, we're back on Alabama. I liked the depth. I mean, let me just count these out here real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys over 12 minutes. Exactly what you want in a first-round game. And now you don't have to play St. Mary's, who is just a nightmare with how slow they play and all the sets Randy Bennett runs for Aiden Mahaney and Saxon in the defensive boards. Sets up real nice here for Alabama. And if there's a consensus worst number 1 seed, I know that sounds funny to say worst number 1 seed, but if there is a consensus 1 seed that might go down, I think it's North Carolina. So we were talking about paths for Auburn, paths for Kentucky. I think we might have just missed the path here for Alabama, and it's setting up pretty nice now.
Well, hey, the one part of my bracket that there's still hope for is my Alabama-Michigan State Sweet 16 game and Alabama to the Elite Eight. So that's all I got left really at this point from a bracket standpoint. But I mean, look, somebody brought up here too, and it's again, if you didn't watch the game, you're probably going to look at this and say they gave up 96 points or whatever it was. But keep in mind, I thought Alabama did defend pretty well for the until the game got out of hand. I thought they defended well. Now, I'm not saying they were perfect on every possession, but I thought they were okay until the game got out of hand. Where at that point it's just like, whatever. I mean, we're up 30 and
34 at half.
yeah. I mean, so I thought they did show signs of improvement there. And I know, again, people, if you didn't watch the game, you're going to say, how is that possible? They gave up 96. But if you watched until things got out of hand with basically, I mean, halfway through the second half, the game was over. They were doing some good things, I thought, defensively. So not perfect, but that's your expectation. They're not going to be perfect defensively. But if they can just be good enough and they're scoring like that, it's not going to matter because they're going to beat pretty much anybody they play. So, yeah, I thought this was exactly what you want to see if you're an Alabama fan, because we'll talk about the Grand Canyon matchup. We are going to do that in a separate video. It'll go up here on the channel in a little while. But I'm with you. I look at this matchup and I'm like, this probably is setting up pretty well for Alabama. Now, let me tell you this. There is one thing about that game, and we'll talk about it in another video. My goodness, did Grand Canyon bring some support. That was tremendous. It's like a home game for them. So that was kind of fun to see, but we'll talk about that game and break it down some more. But yeah, this is the thing with Alabama. I mean, I've said it all year long and we've talked about it. It's just, if they get going offensively and you have Mark Sears just kind of doing the things he can do and slicing and dicing, and then you've got all these other guys who contribute, I think that was the key. Nato said that the full strength part here, if that's the way it's going to be for Alabama the rest of the way through this tournament, and you've got 10 guys playing that many minutes, man, I mean, they've got a shot here to make a run. And so, yeah, it's pretty,
Blake,
pretty good stuff for Alabama.
How many times has Oates told us this year how important right cell is to have him fully healthy? He has not stopped talking about it. And then look at 5 of 6 from 3. He's flat out told us he's one of the best shooters he's coached.
Yep. And that's another reason we mentioned why Alabama's 3-point shooting numbers over the past month were so down. It's because he was not there very often. And so that really hurt them in terms of their overall shooting numbers, because you really were just kind of relying on, you're obviously relying on Sears, but you were also trying to get the best out of everybody else, which you have scores, but just, one of those things. So big win for Alabama. We said, that was, I was going to say that was maybe the most impressive performance for the SEC so far, but really with the 3 teams that are left, Tennessee, Alabama, and A&M, who we're getting to now, they all looked really, really good in game number 1. And the Aggies, where did this come from? Texas A&M, I put it out last. I was looking at the trends. I'm like, okay, I remember they hit that many in that game, that many in that game, that many in that game. This team now has moved up to 344th nationally in 3-point percentage. So even with all these great 3-point shooting games, they're still 344th. But here's the best part of this. We can make fun of the numbers all we want. We can say, man, that's a bad shooting team. But in 3 of their last 5 games now, they've hit 11 or more threes and shot 42% or better from the 3-point line. That is remarkable for a team that all year long the knock was, my goodness, this team is better off throwing it off the top of the backboard and getting the rebound than they are taking actual 3-point shots. But 13-26 against Ole Miss in that game, they won by 26 on the road. 11-26 against Kentucky in the SEC tournament, 42% there. And then they go 13-23 last night against Nebraska, 57%. So I'm not saying that's going to be the norm. And obviously, if they don't shoot it well against Houston, they're going to be in trouble, because that is a team that you remember Chris brought up, and I saw it too. When he said it, I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, there are people out there saying Longwood's going to give Houston a challenge. And so I went and looked around. I'm like, there were people saying that. And I'm like, I don't know what they saw, because Houston still looked pretty good to me. They won by 40. They defended like they usually do, and that's going to be something. We'll break that matchup down too. We'll have another video on the channel looking at A&M and Houston, the rematch. But, man, A&M just look like the team here. They really have over the past, 3 weeks now, that everybody coming into the season, Chris picked them to win the SEC. This was the team that he picked to win the SEC, the team that's been playing like this. And you see kind of, and I already know where you're going to go with this, Max. There has been one guy who has been the absolute difference maker for this Texas A&M team. You have brought his name up as many times probably anybody in the world over the past 3 weeks. But he's been the difference maker. It's not just Taylor and Radford anymore. Somebody else has joined the mix here.
Please. Manny O'Basket, please. I love this guy. I mean, look at his – so he had one game where he had double-digit shot attempts before 2 weeks ago, and that was against FAU in the non-conference. Past few games, past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 5 out of the last 6, he's been in double-digit shot attempts. Have you ever seen someone who can – it's almost like he prefers it to have like that – the defender goes straight up and down and you just like throw your whole body into him, hang in the air for 15 seconds, and then somehow get a shot off and bank it in before your feet hit the ground. This guy's like 15 of 15 doing that. And he's adding threes. Great defender on the perimeter. He's completely changed this team. But you want to talk about – oh, what's this?
That's a fun fact.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Did we win women's also?
Give us an update there.
But Wade Taylor, past 3 games, 7 of 10 from 3, 6 of 12, 6 of 14. This guy has 19 threes in the past 3 games.
Ridiculous.
So you want to talk about three-point shooting being better. Look no further than Wade Taylor. And then rewind all the way back to that Houston game, because these teams have played before. 6 of 14 from 3. Now, I think like about 3 or 4 of those were in the second half when they just came on this like furious comeback. But, I mean, if there's any player you want to have playing with confidence and playing hot, you got him. Wade Taylor's shooting the lights out lately.
Yeah, like you go back to that 5-game losing streak they had. He was 2 of 6 against Vanderbilt from 3, 2 of 5 against Alabama, 0 of 4 against Arkansas, 3 of 10 against Tennessee, and 0 of 7 against South Carolina.
There you go.
But like, all that matters is to get hot at the right time, and then from that point on, he did go 0 of 5 against Georgia. It didn't matter; they still won by 14. But since that point, 3 of 8, 5 of 9, 2 of 8, 6 of 14, 6 of 12, 7 of 10. Like you said, it's just the guy is getting hot at the right time, and that's all that matters when you get to the postseason. And that's the team, like we mentioned, we brought up UConn so many times. Obviously, people could see it with UConn last year, but all you have to do is get hot at the right time. You just have to play your best basketball, and anything can happen at that point. And something we've always talked about, too, with Buzz is, like, he's a great game planning coach. Like, even if, again, sometimes that they're not able to execute, and again, we mentioned, we don't have to keep bringing it up, like, all year long, I thought they put themselves in a good position. They just were not efficient enough to be able to take advantage of it in some of those instances. But now you kind of see, and I think when you get in these kind of one-game scenarios against Buzz, and of course, last year's the exception. They just got, Penn State just came out, and we previewed the game here. We thought it was just a bad matchup for a team like that who could just come out and spread you out and just shoot threes all over the place. And sometimes that's just going to happen. But yeah, I think this was one. Don't worry, Florida fans. We'll get to you in a second because there's a reason I wanted to save that game for last. But you look at kind of the A&M situation now where they've got Houston. We mentioned kind of this is the rematch of the game they played on December the 16th. And, this is – I'm looking around, right, and I'm looking at all the different number 1 seeds that are out there. And maybe we're proven wrong here, but – I still think this is probably the matchup if you're A&M. Obviously I don't think anyone wants UConn. Purdue, maybe, but I don't know why. I just feel like Purdue's the kind of team that would give A&M a few issues. So I don't know. We'll talk about that game, but it was so impressive to see what A&M did in this game against Nebraska because think about this too. Like A&M, the team that we've talked about, like offensively their numbers have been – they're still one of the better offensive teams from an efficiency standpoint, even though their shooting is not great, but they get all the offensive rebounds. Like, they scored 97 against Kentucky. They scored 90 in that loss to Florida. Now they scored 98 against Nebraska. Like, this is just, it's remarkable to see what they're doing right now from a scoring standpoint when it felt like we were just hitting our head against the wall with A&M for the longest time, trying to figure out, oh my goodness, they are so hard to watch offensively. But now they've really figured it out. By the way, too, Max, they won the boards just like we thought they would. I think they won at 40-28 in this game. So,
well, also, and I could be going down a dangerous path here. I hate to do this. I hate to talk about what ifs. They lost to Florida by 5. I'm not even gonna say what if. They lost to Florida by 5, and Denzel Aberdeen had the game of his career, and Florida made their season high in threes.
Yeah.
They lost by 5. Okay, that's their only loss in March. That's it. We should be talking about this team as one of the hottest teams in the country right now. And that Denzel Aberdeen game has kind of swept A&M just under the national radar for being really talked about. If there's one team Houston, when Houston gets that draw and they're looking at Nebraska and A&M, I guarantee you Houston was going, I really hope we don't have to play A&M again.
Yeah.
Guarantee it.
We said it. I mean, that was a great game the first time around. Radford didn't play. Taylor went off, of course, as usual. But, yeah, I mean, now you kind of look at it and, okay, so I'm going to give you what you want here, like the Bart Torvik, where's the team rank in terms of what they're playing like over the past certain amount of time, right?
What do you got?
A&M is now the 6th best team in the country since March the 1st. So since the calendar hit March, they are the number 6 team in the country. You know who the number 2 team is? It's Houston. And so now you also know who the number 4 team was. That was Auburn. But they're out. So just keep that in mind. A&M, they have flipped a switch here. And we said, too, something about this A&M team is they're gamers where, like, the aspect of, like, you have to win this game.
Yeah.
We've said it. They've won every must-win game they've had to win over the past, because, like I said, the Florida game was not a must-win game. They had clinched the SEC, or they had clinched the NCAA tournament bid at that point. But they won the must-win game against Georgia, Mississippi State, Ole Miss twice, Kentucky, now Nebraska, and now they've got another must-win game against Houston. And so, yeah, they're ready. They're motivated. So,
yeah,
we'll break it down. So, A&M fans, we will have a video up here in just a bit, looking at the Houston-Texas A&M game like we will with Alabama and Grand Canyon. But let's talk about Florida, because I did want to kind of save them for last, because there's something – I mean, I think Chris said this, but there was someone else I saw. And when they said it, initially I'm just kind of like, I don't know, man. I'm like, there's a lot of good games out there. But someone, like, went all in on this, and I wish I could remember who. I was either watching something on my phone or saw it on Twitter or something. They're like, this is easily going to be the best first-round game out there. And I'm like, Florida and Colorado, huh? And we talked about the matchup. Like, we looked at it and we're like, these two teams feel really close together. And Ken Pom had this, like, a one-point game. You could easily make the case one way or the other. But they were right. Like, this thing was nuts. Yeah. 102-100. Colorado wins this game, knocks out the Gators. And ultimately, I think some of our fears with Florida became a reality in that it's just giving up too many points. And, of course, not having Hand Logden, we know that makes a difference in terms of defense and what he could do there. But credit Florida for battling back here, because it looked like this thing was over. And then, they were down 13 with like 4 or 5 minutes to go. And I'm thinking, yikes. Justin in the comments. You want to see a story here in three comments. Coming out under the rock. Hello. Now going back under the rock. So Justin's checking out. But yeah, I mean, this was a frustrating one, I'm sure, for Florida, because they did put themselves back in kind of that position. And they got off to a good start, too. And this is where I think, if you're Florida, you're looking back and really thinking about this. Max, Colorado had 14 points with 11 and a half minutes to go in the first half. They wind up scoring 102. I'm not great at math, you know this, but that's a lot of points given up in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But I mean, it kind of came down to all those guys we mentioned, whether it was Simpson, whether it was De Silva, Lampkin, all those guys. Like, man, they just hit shots, and obviously they got to the free throw line a lot. Some of that came towards the end, but I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like, this is one that's going to sting for Florida because you just defensively they just could not find a way to get stopped. So
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. And I was worried about it. I thought that Tyrese Samuel, he had 3 fouls. He only played 25
yeah,
minutes. I thought that Condon being on De Silva more would kind of not be the worst matchup. But then there in that second half, they got the switch with Lampkin onto Condon, and Lampkin's got about 40 pounds on him, and it just couldn't keep him out of the low post. Just couldn't get a stop, and that's kind of been our worry with Florida in a few games. They've had some big leads and let teams just hang around, and it's been close. They've had close games that shouldn't be close games. The reason why this one really stings is because you're always going to be able to fall back and say, well, geez, we didn't have Micah. It's like
yeah.
that, and that's in the back of your head is like, well, if we had Micah, would we have won the game? So that's why this one stings. I thought that the fight back was great. Walter Clayton, incredible. You saw him after the game. He was, it was just tough. It was a tough pill to swallow, for Florida fans. And what a year out of Tyrese Samuel and Zion Pullen. I mean, we in the offseason, Blake, we were pretty high on Tyrese Samuel. I know you were especially high on Samuel. I think he outperformed our expectations, but then even Zion Pullen, I mean, first team All SEC guard coming over from Riverside. I loved Pullen this year. And it's gonna be sad. I really liked this team. This was a high flying team that got up and down, a lot of 100-point games and whatnot. It is tough to see him go out after Clayton made that 3. And I know the Florida fans all on Twitter were screaming about Simpson pushing off on that last shot. Listen, with how the tournament's been going, we're not going to get any calls. It just we're not getting a call, guys.
You got to assume you're not getting any calls at this point. I mean, look, that's where, like we did talk about, we were doing kind of the Torvik momentum basically rank over the past however long too for Colorado, and they've been one of the better teams, top 15 team in the country. But I just think, it's hard to put yourself in that position where you just cannot get a stop. And I think that's just kind of what it came down to was ultimately. And I know it's brought up kind of in the comments about, the SEC's weak defense here from this one. But I think look, there were 3 teams that fully met that criteria this year at certain points, and that was Alabama, Florida, Kentucky. Yes, 2 of them have now gotten bounced. I don't think Auburn was a bad defensive team. We know that. They just, again, caught a team where they put themselves in a position to give up more points than they scored, and that's, how you lose games. And so, but I think Florida was a team. We did mention that in the preview. That was they had struggled to put teams away. Like, even as good as they had been offensively, they had struggled just to completely send the game out of reach. And they never really got a chance to do that here because even though they were up 10 early, I mean, that's early. You're not going to put a team away halfway through the first half. So, I mean, like Max said, though, you can play the what-if game with Hand-Logton and all that. And so, so that's a tough one for the Gators to go out that way because it felt like we mentioned, it felt like a matchup against Marquette. They'd have a chance just because of their guard play, and it just didn't come to fruition. So the Gators are ousted along with everybody else in the SEC except for Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Alabama. Yeah, Sam, I mean, every game in March is a must-win, but A&M's had a lot more of those than anybody else over the past 3 weeks because it's wild to think, too, that like they were, they're probably, I don't know, they're 1 loss away, maybe 2 losses away from they're not even being in this field, right? I mean, you think about it, like that's what's fascinating about A&M is, if you go back and look at that body of work over the past, it started with the Georgia game. I mean, let's say they lose one. I mean, well, if they lost the one game against Ole Miss in the SEC tournament, then they're definitely out because they don't get the Kentucky win, I think. But, even if, let's say they lose the game at Ole Miss or whatever, lose the game maybe at home to Mississippi State, it's different. Maybe they still get in, but they're right there. So, yeah, tough. So,
and the thing with Florida is it's going to be. I know we're going to do our season, wrap ups and everything, and we'll do a whole video on all these teams. But this team might get shaken up a lot. We could see a large movement of players because you got Pullen and Samuel leaving, but have heard nothing of, nothing concrete from Kugel or Clayton about what they're doing. So could be a wild offseason in Gainesville.
Yep. Shout out to Tony. He's heading to the Lynx. He's out of here. We appreciate you, Tony. Can't blame him.
Living the life. Living the life.
Also, Mark brings up your stat, Max. SEC should not play a game before 8 p.m. Eastern.
We're undefeated when the sun goes down, guys. We just got to keep playing at night. That's all.
Alabama plays at 7:10 Eastern tomorrow night. A&M plays at 8:40 Eastern. So,
perfect.
Could bode well.
Perfect.
Could bode well for the SEC in that one. Tennessee, of course, plays at 8 Eastern tonight. So, maybe that's all we needed. Play games at normal times. What is this chaos, anarchy, playing games before 8 p.m. Eastern? What are we doing here? So, but there you go. All right, guys, we're going to wrap up here in just a couple minutes because we are going to do our previews videos. We'll have those up for you in a little while for Houston A&M and Alabama Grand Canyon. But, again, don't check out completely. If you're a basketball fan, of course, don't check out if you're an SEC fan. We'll have a lot of football, baseball stuff coming after the NCAA tournament, of course. But Max and I are going to be doing basketball like year-round, all off season. You're going to get transfer videos. We'll be breaking down what the 14th man on the roster had for breakfast yesterday. We'll be doing it all here at Southeastern 14. So transfers, and don't forget, too, we got some coaching stuff we got to figure out.
Oh, yeah.
There's going to be some movement. I can tell you that with full confidence. Of course, Vanderbilt has to fill a vacancy. There are a couple of rumored coaches perhaps on the move out there. You know who I'm talking about. So some things to keep an eye on, I think, over the next 48 hours with the SEC coaching vacancies / carousel here in this league. So I think things are about to get very interesting in the SEC. So, we'll talk about that, of course.
I think the famous Arkansas has contacted list, I think is already up in the 30s. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken.
Well,
so
Arkansas may be contacting somebody for a different role that may have nothing to do with the transfer portal. We'll find out. So
yeah,
I know, and Brandon's going to ask the question, like, thoughts on Musk possibly leaving. I will just tell you, I think there is where there's smoke, there's fire, and I think this applies in this situation. So
do you
trust
see Blocker leaving?
Yeah, so Blocker's leaving. Of course, Devo's leaving. We're not necessarily, because I think that was probably expected, just based on how the season went and such. But
is anyone staying?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
It's going to get interesting. So, Again, Arkansas fans, I think you'll know where you stand in the next 48 hours. You'll have a very good idea of where you stand coaching-wise and roster-wise, because one applies to the other. I think things, like I said, could get interesting there in Fayetteville. And, you talk about coaches starting to get locked down with those extensions. We mentioned it.
Yep.
Nate Oates, Todd Golden, Chris Beard. It's gonna get interesting. Vandy's got to fill a void here that they've got to make a hire, which I don't know how fast that's gonna happen, because I don't think people even know who Vandy is even in the mix for. Not a lot coming out of there, but
Alabama's already signing transfers.
Yeah,
they already got one.
I think you should put them in the game on Sunday against Grand Canyon. Just put them in there. What's the NCAA going to do? Put him in there. Shout out to Big Baller Brett. who's here.
There
Yesterday
we
was a
go.
good day for Brett. I wonder why. So not a lot of guesses needed to come to that conclusion. But all right, guys, we are going to wrap up. Max is headed to the gym in Charlotte here in a little while. He's going to go watch Tennessee play against Texas. So that should be a fun one. We know one SEC team's advancing to the Sweet 16. Is it going to be the current one or the future one? We all have our opinions on.
You know what? You know what's going to happen, Blake, is we're going to get 8 teams in the field, and then all of them are going to get knocked out early except one. That's going to take us all the way into a deep run.
Oh, I'm sure. One will go all the way, and then they'll break our heart, like in the Final Four.
Oh, yeah,
like,
they'll drag us along and just crush it. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. But again, guys, we appreciate you watching. Look, we still have 500 plus of you in here, even though it's kind of been a very down NCAA tournament so far for the SEC. But 3 teams left standing: the Vols, the Crimson Tide, the Aggies. All march on, and we will, of course, have you covered here at Southeastern 14. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button on your way out. That really helps us out. And again, if you want to check out our Substack, we're going to throw the link to that real quick in the comments. Throw your email in there. We'll have some written stuff going up on our Substack. We'll definitely be using that a lot more in the off season for basketball. We'll be doing videos constantly, but we'll definitely be using the Substack a lot in the off season. So be sure to throw your email in there.
A lot of interviews planned, guys. A lot of incoming. I'm going to do a lot of incoming transfer interviews, and not your typical stuff. I'm getting in between the lines.
We're going hard here on these transfers. So you'll get a
Houston
lot of good stuff out of it. Yeah.
This
so throw your email. There he is.
This is the Alabama transfer that's already in.
Yeah.
So it's already transfer season. It's crazy.
Never ends.
Never.
But again, guys, we appreciate you. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. You see our handles there at the Blake Lovell, at Max Barr CBB. Follow us. A lot of fun stuff we put out on Twitter during these games, so you can follow along with our thoughts there. But again, hit subscribe button. We'll have videos coming up probably in the next couple hours for Houston, Texas A&M, Alabama, Grand Canyon, and of course, check out our Tennessee and Texas preview already up. And we will probably, as long as Max is not at the arena, if we get some big stuff on the coaching front, we'll be doing videos immediately, kind of reacting to that. So even if I do them myself, that's what we'll do. We'll have you covered on any kind of coaching movement here over the next 48 hours. So, all right, guys, we appreciate you watching, and we will talk to you again here soon at Southeastern 14.